right?
Yeah, people are joining.
Awesome.
So, hello everyone, and very good evening to you. This is Samir Surtur, Regional Director of Founder Institute in the UAE and GCC region. I'm very glad to welcome all of you to this wonderful webinar presented by our very close friend and a supporter of Founder Institute, Mr. Nader Sabry.
Hello, everybody. How you doing?
Hi, Nader, and welcome to the first webinar of. Very good evening to you. This is Samir Surtur, Regional Director of Founder Institute. Nader, I'm handing over the reins to you to get started the webinar.
Okay.
So if you can go ahead and share the presentation, please.
Yeah, sure. Are we all good? It's just thumbs up. Can you hear me?
Yes, all good.
Perfect. All good. Okay, so guys, I just want to start by thanking Samir. Samir and I have known each other for quite some time, and we've worked in the ecosystem here in the region for a very long time. So we've kind of seen this born from kind of very little to what we see today, and have a very deep understanding of the trajectory of where this ecosystem is going. So super excited to be here today. I just want to be sure with you that I need permission to share screen, Samir.
Are we all good? Just thumbs up. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Yes. All perfect. All good. Okay. So guys, I just want to start by thanking Samir. Samir,
I think we have a delay here.
And we've worked in the ecosystem here in the region for a very long time. So we've kind of seen this born from kind of very little to what we see today, and have a very deep understanding of the trajectory of where this ecosystem is going. So super excited to be here today. So
Samir, if you can just give me confirmation, you can see my screen on your end?
Yes, we can see your screen, Nader.
Perfect, cool. So as long as, I always like to check if all the technicalities are in place, because I don't want to start and nothing is happening and everybody's like, what the hell is going on? So awesome, welcome to my talk. Today we're going to be talking about cracking the code of growth. I specialize in an area which is basically the science of growth, which sounds weird to most people. They're like, wow, there's a science behind growth. Surprisingly, there is, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about that today and how that has implications on the things that you do. So as we get started, I'll just take a quick opportunity to introduce myself. I'm a strategist, innovator, and entrepreneur. I've raised $20 million directly for my own startups and $100 million for startups I've helped develop or co-found, $3 billion in FDI for the Emirate of Dubai. I've been involved in NASA space tech. I'm the 43rd person in history to be certified by the NASA Space Technology Program with the US Space Foundation. Was appointed 3 years back to the Space Technology Hall of Fame, working with space companies to basically commercialize their companies, which is in an area that's a whole different story, but is very deep. I'm also a top 50 writer in the area of innovation on medium.com. So do check me out on Medium. If you are an avid reader, you'll find a lot of my content there, a lot of helpful stuff. The first thing I want to introduce you to is my bestseller, which is Ready, Set, Growth Hack. This is the blueprint that I've built over the last 25 years. This helps you basically initially start from nothing to something, or if you are in an organization that has a growth problem and you need to figure out how to exponentially or accelerate the growth of your organization, this is where the whole narrative starts. The next part is a new release. It just came out in January. So I'm going to be talking a bit more about this, but this is called growth thinking. And growth thinking is a methodology in the growth space, or growth hacking space to be very specific. And it's equivalent to design thinking for growth hacking, or the business model, business canvas model, business model canvas. Oh my God, I got that all over the place. But the business canvas model, this is the equivalent of it in the growth hacking space. We'll talk a little bit more about that. Before we get started, I run a program called the 10-Day Growth Hacking Challenge. I'm going to leave it to the end, but I'm telling you about it now because we have a little bit of a surprise from Samir's side, and he's going to tell you a little bit more about this challenge and what it means, and a little surprise that's coming for some of your members, right? So we'll talk about that at the very end. So as we're going to get started, I'm going to dig into what this is, and that's probably like the number one question you're asking yourself at the moment. So what I like to do is I like to show examples of like this actually happening. So these are three contrasting clients that I have, on the spectrum of difference in industry, difference in size, difference in geography. And there's a reason for this. As I continue to talk about this, you'll understand why. It's everything from a health supplement company that we 40x'd its growth in Australia, to a food and beverage company in Canada, we 18x'd their franchise, to a fashion SaaS in the US, that's software as a service. We 65-folded their growth. So this is just some examples that I put out there to show you that, wow, okay, this can happen. But the number one issue here is when I show that to you, and this happens with all my clients, is like, how do you get those type of results? They know that there's people out there getting those kinds of results. They hear about people getting these kinds of results. They find different techniques written about it, but the problem is that they actually don't know where to go or how to work with it. They don't know the techniques and they don't understand the science behind growth. And that's where all of this gets started. The first thing I'm going to explain to you is that growth has some very specific numbers to it. And I want to just show you how unique real exponential growth is. In the US, there's about 32 million registered businesses. Less than 1% of them make $1 million or more a year. And 1% of those 1% make $1 billion or more. And roughly 4.5 to 4.7% of those billion-dollar companies are unicorns, okay? So as you can see, that funnel gets like really, really thin. Well, if it's only $1 million or more, may sound like a lot, but it's actually not as much as you think. And those for you who are scaling a business have probably figured out very quickly that $1 million can go away like that. So imagine that if less than 1% in the US actually make $1 million or more as a business, you can understand how rare and unique the science of growth actually is. So you can't really go to Harvard and get an MBA in growth. You can definitely get it in strategy and marketing. But anyways, so who's using this, okay? So this is where it gets very interesting. So about 98, and I think it's actually a bit more than that, but anyways, 96 to 98% of unicorns, which are startups worth $1 billion or more, have growth hacking at the center of what they do. It's everything that they do. And I'm going to explain to you why and how that is. But on the complete other side of the spectrum are Fortune 1000s, and we have about 1.5% of them who are trying to implement accelerated and exponential growth methods that bring growth hacking into the core of their business model. Okay, so they're in the process of doing that. And then in the middle, we've got corporates at 3.5%, and then startups at 21%. So here's the crazy thing about it. So you're probably thinking, well, okay, a unicorn is $1 billion startup, but I'm also a startup company. And so I'm probably using some of these exponential methods, but only 21% of them are actually doing that. The remaining 80% are not. They haven't figured it out. And that's why the failure rate is very high. So what is growth hacking, right? So in my very first book, one of the biggest problems that we have in this space, and you probably already know this, you probably Googled me or Googled the term, what is growth hacking prior to this talk. And what you're going to find out, and you already know this, is like there are 50 different definitions for this. The majority of them are very technical definitions. And the way that it was coined actually created a lot of, it was coined at a time where it needed to be coined the way it was, but evolved in a way that the definition didn't actually tell the whole story. So the simplest thing of what is growth hacking is about disproportionate results. How does that look? It's essentially, as you can see, as I'm showing on the screen there, you put in 4 units of effort and you get 1 unit of growth. That's where you are today. But where you want to be is you want to put 1 unit of effort and you want to get 4 units of results. That's disproportionate results. In the middle, the little ninja, that's the growth hacker. That's you. That's you using the process of growth hacking to essentially take the least amount of resources and get the most disproportionate type of results possible that can come out of it. And that's the essence of growth hacking. That's actually what it is. You can leave all those technical definitions out because they won't help you very much. Once you understand this and how this works, your mindset will shift. Happens to everybody who takes my courses or read my books, and all of a sudden you start to see results in your world. So here's the thing that I like to tell people is what is not growth hacking. So it's probably, the next part is like, okay, well, you've just told me what it is, but what is it not? Because there's a lot of myth around it. And that's because a lot of people talk about it who don't understand this space. So things like, it's not marketing or technology. It's not just a trend or a fad. It's not digital marketing. It's not exclusive to a few. It's not for startups, and it's not only for tech companies, okay? So the persona is usually that growth hacking is only for tech startups, which is not true. The reason it has that persona is because those who are best at utilizing it just happen to be tech startups who do it very well. And it's not marketing, because a lot of people will sell you digital marketing, say, oh, we're going to growth hack. And that's not growth hacking either. All these parts have to work with growth hacking, but they're not exclusive to it. And that's where people get lost, because they're saying, well, I'm going to growth hack your Instagram account. I'm going to growth hack your YouTube channel, and so they go on and on and on. But then it works for a short little while, and then it just doesn't happen. And there's a reason for that, because it's actually not growth hacking. So I'm going to explain to you the evolution of this, and you're going to understand. This is going to help solidify some of the things I've just described to you, and you're going to be like, oh, okay, now this starts to make a lot of sense. So when the term got coined, it was initially code, right? So growth hacking starts in a very shady place, although growth hacking has been happening for 50 years, right? It's been longer than that. So when you read my book, I give you examples of things that McDonald's have done, like in the 50s and 60s, as growth hacks without any tech at all. In fact, you can start growth hacking with no tech whatsoever. But where this started to solidify and become really something else is when we started to use code. And code helps amplify our inherent ability to multiply what we want to do by folds. That's why it became core to the idea of growth hacking. So that's why it started in the really shady area. It did start as hacking. There were, funny things were happening. We call it the black hat area. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because I know you've heard about it. You probably know, some of you probably already know what that means. The next evolution is basically code plus marketing. Okay, so that's kind of like where we are today, and we're evolving out of that, which is then code plus marketing plus a function. So we call this cross-functional growth hacking. Cross-functional growth hacking is where we are today because it requires several different functions for it to work. It could be code plus marketing plus operations, or it could be code plus operations plus R&D, or it could be code plus human resources plus finance. And so these different functions will all have to play a part in order to make it work. Now, what's happened is that it started in a black hat area, and it works all the way to white hat. What's the difference? Okay, so if I went on Google and I typed in hack LinkedIn, growth hack LinkedIn, or growth hack Instagram, and anything that you find on Google is white hat, and it won't work. Okay, so why won't it work? Essentially what we've seen, so I run a program called Growth Labs, and Growth Labs is an AI program that uses a data framework that helps people in the growth hacking space basically shortcut their growth hacking efforts, okay? That's just in its simple form. What we found out was that the more secretive a growth hack is, the more potent it is. So we in our community, and those people I work with, we don't deal with black hat. What we deal with is grayscale, and often we're on the very dark side of the grayscale without crossing over into black hat activities. What sits in those areas are secrets. They're top secret growth hacks, and they work their way from secret to top secret to secret, from secret to confidential, all the way to classified, and then finally open. And as it goes through that life cycle, okay, more people start using that growth hack, the less potent it becomes. So if you went on and you looked at like an Instagram hack right now, and you want to implement it, and you're like, holy shit, it doesn't work. What happened? This guy promised me, this guy showed results, he showed evidence. At the time he did it, and the way he did it, obviously it worked. But there's probably millions of other people who are doing it, and these holes are getting locked up. And so whatever you're trying to do is actually not working, or has very low potency rate. So where we focus is on the high potency rate kind of things. So how does this all come together? Okay, so you're sitting like, okay, how do I find my growth hack, right? So we look at this, and we talk about it in my book here in a lot more detail. I have several articles. So if you go to my website for this book, which is mygrowththinking.com, and just click on blog, you're going to find just a ton of free content that can teach you this stuff. So essentially, when we look at it, we have this matrix. We look at things where we're trying to find a limit, we're trying to find a gap, we're trying to find a hole, or we're trying to find a combination. Okay, that's how we identify an area to exploit. And when I say exploit, I mean that in a positive, constructive way. I'm not talking about destructive and harmful way. Not in my books or my training or with my clients do we promote anything illegal, unethical, or immoral. I always like to just put that out there. But what happens is you'll naturally find areas to growth hack. Now, one of the things that we've seen with a lot of our clients, the things we do, is that there's basically a supply and demand gap in social media content. So it could be like a lot of demand on Facebook because it happens to be popular, shifts over to Instagram, shifts over to Snapchat, and now it's shifted over to TikTok. And so the question for us is always, what's the next one? Because there's always a next one in the chain. And what happens is that they become a lot more solidified, a lot more tighter, and then growth becomes very, very limited. So if you read about people who are deep in the growth hacking in the social space, so obviously it's not just social media, but I'm just using that as an example because I know that most of us can relate to that. Instagram is like a really difficult place to grow right now because it's just been locked, several corners have been locked up. Now, it doesn't mean it's impossible, but new different techniques need to be used to do that. So we shift over to other areas like TikTok, or how do we cross-functionally growth hack between TikTok and Instagram? And you can see that TikTok is already doing that because they make it very easy to integrate and share content and branded TikTok directly into Instagram and YouTube, driving traffic from those sources directly into them. So they're already doing it themselves and making it possible for others. So it's just an example. So in my first book, so the first book, this one here, which is Ready, Set, Growth Hack, this is essentially where I teach you the blueprint. And the blueprint is based on this three things, right? These three things are basically the growth problem, the growth experiment, and then growth extensions, okay? The growth problem may sound very simple, but it's actually one of the more complicated parts of this process because 85% of CEOs that I meet with and I ask them, what are your top three priorities right now? They can't answer the question. And if I asked you that question right now, you probably wouldn't be able to answer it either. It has nothing to do with intelligence or that you're disorganized. It has everything to do with distraction and not being able to understand what your real growth problem is. By being able to figure that out, and there are techniques to do that, including we have a tool that I'm actually testing now that I've developed. We have about 280 diagnostic points to help you quickly identify what the truth is behind your actual growth problem. Because in many cases, you'll have an idea, but you may not know it to like a pinpoint precision, which is crucial because if you're solving the wrong problem, you're not going to grow, right? So ideally, it's like we want to be solving, at a pinpoint level, the right growth problem because it has implications that perpetuate throughout the whole organization and helps you obviously further grow because as you solve different growth problems. The growth experimentation is the heart of growth hacking, which is experimenting. Now, experimentation is crucial to this process. In the second book here, which I'm going to talk about a bit deeper, it's a methodology to do exactly that. Now, the problem with experimentation is the minute I say that, you're thinking, oh, this is going to be long, this is going to be expensive, this is going to be complicated, my shareholders are not going to like it, my boss is going to be like, what the hell is this? Or convincing someone else is going to be difficult. Here's the reality of it. The unicorns of this world every single day experiment. Booking.com does about 1,000 experiments a day just to put it into perspective. And they've been doing this from 1996. So 20 years ago plus, they knew this when others did not. So your organizations that have hyper growth and growing at exponential levels, they're experimenting multiple experiments per day. It's not one experiment per quarter. And their experiments are highly structured. They're fast, they're simple, they're cheap. And the idea is that you want them to fail. If your mindset comes in that, okay, we're going to experiment for success, that's actually not what we're looking for. What we're looking for is we're looking for failing really quick. Why? Because the real growth comes from unknown areas that nobody sees, and you will never expect them coming from where they come from. That's where the real growth comes from. So it'll surprise you. And then extension is about full scale, like automation, full scale of scaling, and then full scale operations. This is about, and I talk about that a bit more in the book. So we talk about like, what does automation mean? What does integration really mean? How does that fit the scale? And then the ultimate failure point of growth hacking, if you can't get it right, is full scale operations, which is making that scale part of your DNA and part of your operational procedures. Many organizations come all the way to that point and they fail. Okay, so we talk about that a bit more. Now, putting this into action, we have a 5-step process, which is in the Growth Thinking book, which is essentially profiling, designing, sequencing, testing, and then learning, okay? So this process is almost, okay, so I use an analogy, I call it like, it's like peanut butter or jelly or chocolate and chili, okay? So there's this consistent battle, and you've all experienced this, between creativity and structure, okay? The reality is that structure should be empowering creativity, and creativity should be allowing the structure to make that creativity work. In many cases, what happens is the two don't come together. So it's just either peanut butter on its own or jelly on its own. And so this process is peanut butter and jelly that comes together. So about 5,000 growth hackers use this globally. We've been testing it through our growth labs, which is where the data comes from. So it's a completely data-driven process, but it's extremely creative, intuitive, and super simple. So it allows you to start building those growth hacks. In each book, we have a spot for 20 growth hacks, and you start to develop them one by one. The 10-day growth hacking challenge uses this, and we'll talk a bit more about that a bit later. Now, this is something I'm not going to go too far and too deep on this, but for those of you who've done an MBA, you're probably going to be like, what the hell? I've just wasted a whole bunch of money. For those who haven't done an MBA, I've saved you a whole bunch of money, because I'm just going to break this down to its simplest form. You've probably never seen it like this. Business methodologies have basically 4 types. First, there's those that are designed for product and service design. So that's like your design thinking. Then you've got your project management, which is like your Scrum, Waterfall, Agile, and so forth. Then you've got your company, building a company methodology. So that's like your business canvas model and so forth. And then you've got this little tiny area, which is accelerating growth. And if you go search it, you're going to find that there's very little to nothing in that area. Hence why this methodology, which is growth thinking, was created. So you can go and design your product. You can manage that product. You can build a company around it. But how do you grow, right? That's where the science to this comes in. And that's where there's a problem with some of the education systems. Several accelerators come to me and talk about, hey, we need to change our curriculum. We need to get our guys really thinking and understanding growth, how to actually go from what we want them to scale. We need to get them started, which we're doing. We need them to scale so they can exit, right? How do we do that? That's the big question. And that's growth hacking. That's what we're talking about. Now, why is this important? So this is where we bring all of this down together. So I've got these 9 statements here. And if you say yes to any of them, so your competitors are gaining market share faster than you need growth hacking. New entrants are gaining more growth than you, growth hacking. Okay, you cannot keep up with the changes in consumer needs, growth hacking. Traditional value creation tactics are no longer working like they used to. Sustainable, profitable growth no longer works. Margins are getting squeezed. You face an increase in pressure to change your operating model. Your attempts to grow fail. And finally, cutting costs is the only focus you have. If at any level of any of these are resonating with you, you've just answered the question why you would need to growth hack. At the end of this, what I always do is I encourage anybody who comes to any of my talks is get yourself educated on the topic. So I provide many resources. So I have tons of free resources on my YouTube. You can just type my name into YouTube, go to my channel. There's a ton of stuff in there. I have daily content that comes out in a TikTok style to educate you. I've got the challenge, and I've got tons of educational content in there. Next is just start experimenting. From today, the minute you leave this call, start experimenting. That's the best thing you can do. The next thing is you got to work with the right people, okay? So getting the right people on your team, getting the right resources, because that mindset and that culture that cultivates around your growth is crucial to how you move forward. So putting those 3 things together is my action plan to you. That's what I challenge you to do. And so speaking of challenges, and you're going to see that on my channel, is the 10-day growth hacking challenge. Samir, I've given him the power to, so the way this works is it's 10 days, 3 growth hacks to 10x your growth. And in those 10 days, we work intensively using the growth thinking methodology to 10x the growth of your business. If you go to my YouTube, you can see this in action. Season 1 is still being produced. So you see the first 2 contenders and the remaining are coming. This challenge is only by nomination. So you can only be nominated by me or nominated by one of the contenders. And it works on a paid forward system. So I've handed over my power to Samir, and Samir is going to be selecting, I think, 3 to 5 people that he believes would do very well, and he's going to nominate them. And I think he's going to do that on June 15th at his next event. Correct, Samir?
Yeah, correct. June 15th, cool. We have our Founders Showcase, our Cohort 2 Founders Showcase at DIFC Innovation Hub. And we'll be actually announcing the nominations for the 10-day growth hacking challenge. We will have about 3 to 5 very smart individuals who have really growth hacked through the COVID scenario and multiplied their businesses by, I would say, more than 500x. So nice. Really, yeah, really, I'm right now speaking to these individuals, and during that time I'll take this opportunity to do an announcement, and so if you have not enrolled to the Founder Showcase, go to fi.co. You will see Cohort 2 Founder Showcase, go ahead and present yourselves for a virtual session, and listen to us. There's some interesting pitches, as well as obviously Nader is going to be there. We're going to have a small pitch, and then we'll be announcing the nominations for the 10-day growth hacking challenge.
Awesome.
Nader, if we are done with the presentation, can we leave the floor open for questions?
Absolutely. So I'm going to stop sharing my screen, and there we go. And there we go. Open up. Let's rock and roll.
Brilliant. We have Manal, my colleague, assisting us as well. Manal, if you're here and listening to us, welcome, Manal. So may I ask you to just coordinate the Q&A, and we can take up the questions. If we are able to bring some people to talk, that would be awesome too. I'm also going to hand over the co-hosting rights, if you don't have already, so that you can bring people up the stage. And we'll go from there. We'll spend about 15-20 minutes around Q&A.
Sure.
Perfect.
I suggest let's start with asking whoever wants to raise a question, if you can raise your hand, please.
And feel free to type those questions in the chat box or the Q&A box, anyone which you feel more comfortable with. And happy to take any of your questions. Any questions can be directed to Nader directly or to us. If you want to know a little bit more about what we do at Founder Institute, our accelerator program, etc.
I also suggest that if you want to share a case study, like if you want to share a personal experience about your growth, not only questions, that would be great. So let's see, I think we have one question in the chat. Some businesses are under a non-regulated market. How can we deal with this case if the local government doesn't have existing rules? Can you assist us to coordinate with the government entities such as FI? I think this is for Samir, the second part. The first part, maybe Nader can help answering. Yep.
Sure. So, okay. So I'm assuming that's a cryptocurrency related question. Maybe not. I mean, it's not clear to me, but nonetheless, governments, okay. So COVID has really changed the way policymakers are looking at the world right now. Okay. They're not necessarily moving at the speed we would want them to, because they don't think and work like a startup company. But what I can tell you from the discussions I've had with different policymakers, not just in the UAE, but other countries, they're in a lot of trouble. Many of them globally, they're in a lot of trouble because they haven't been keeping up with innovation and technology to the levels that they have. The UAE, though, on another level, though, has been. So the UAE is a country that is extremely dynamic, and they have a very assertive, high-level kind of leadership imperative that is like tech and innovation needs to move forward, and regulations need to work with them. So what I can tell you is, on one aspect, is that you need to be patient to work with the regulators. On the second element is you're going to have to find growth hacks that work around it without breaking the law or obviously hurting anybody. I've seen it happen. We've seen organizations who find ways to do that. Most of the time, though, they're temporary. The regulator plays a really important role. Now, what has happened in the past with some of my clients is we've gone directly to the regulator and we work with them directly, meaning we educate the regulator with the processes and some of the things that we want to do so that they can work with us to help create the regulations. Because in many cases, they need inputs from the people who are breaking the boundaries of science and technology to work with them to give them the input. So if everybody works in isolation, it doesn't help anybody. But if you start communicating and working with the regulators, you're going to find several open minds and open hands to kind of work with you. And we've seen this in action in several different industries, especially in the financial sector here in the UAE.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you. Samir, do you want to add to this, or shall we take next question?
Yeah, in fact, I just wanted to add something very interesting about policy and frameworks. You know, most of the government agencies have completely retransformed the way of doing businesses during COVID, and really that's amazing. And obviously UAE leads the world, I would say, in terms of policy transformation.
Yeah.
And they have been doing it for last 5 years. You know, if you walk into Emirates Towers, the 10X program, Dubai Future Accelerator program, and Dubai Government Accelerators, which is actually bringing all the ministries together in a single room, innovating to the next 50, 100 years planning, which is very, very futuristic. And really, they have 100-day growth hacks to hack on certain problems facing the economy, facing the population, facing the residents and citizens, clearly around healthcare, around law enforcement, and each of the ministries participating actively to solve that particular problem. FI is actually very closely involved, I would say, not directly, indirectly involved in actually helping, and we're very fortunate to be working with some of these government departments to kind of, bring or create economic impact at a very early stage when a company is being formed, or when a corporate employee, and we have about 40% of the corporate employees trying to join FI, displaced because either they've been displaced from their jobs, or really last 20 years they've been stuck in corporate life and wanting to innovate. So what we've seen is there is an amazing amount of government support if you want to start up. So I would say UAE is a fantastic, and you should select UAE as a final destination to build your global startup. Yeah. Next question, Manoj.
Yeah. Agree. We are blessed to be cooperating and operating in the UAE. Next question. Next couple of questions. I'll just share two questions and I'll leave it to you. So the first question is they are asking about more information on how to participate in the growth hack in June. And the second question for Nader is, what is the single best growth hack you have ever seen, particularly the one that surprised you the most? So first question maybe by Samir, how to participate, and Nader.
Yeah, I'll give the preference to Nader because Nader's sessions, sure. And then I'll take up the second one. Thank you.
Yeah. Well, first off, I like the question. Probably the biggest growth hack I've ever done was the growth hack that helped me take my company public. So I started one of the very first internet service providers in the world. It was called COL, which competes with AOL. So it was Canada Online versus America Online in the Canadian market. So it was in 1994, 1995 when we first started out. So as we were scaling the business to go public and we're about to go IPO, our business plan was essentially just more physical coverage across the country. And that was just the basis of it. So each setup, the minimal setup would cost us about $300,000. So if we were going to 10 cities, that's $3 million in just infrastructure to just be present and just to start. And obviously the cost escalates from there. So very early on, we found a technology which is called iPass. It was invented in Canada as well. So iPass is essentially in the very early days of the internet, this was the switchboard for the internet. So it's an algorithm that basically knows how to move information in small pockets across other parts and high speed. So in today's world, you're kind of like, well, duh, I mean, that's obvious. But in 1995, 96, that wasn't so obvious. There was a lot of problems that needed to be solved. So because of this, there was what we call VPOPs, virtual points of presence, that already existed in data warehouses with the infrastructure we already needed. So using this algorithm with the infrastructure that had already existed within their network, we were able to acquire a single location for $1,200. So our business plan was $3 million because we wanted 10 major cities in the country as our initial starting point, which would cost us $12,000. And so all that extra money we were able to raise because they couldn't see the growth hack itself was able to go into really expanding quickly in other areas. And it was basically our ability to understand the movement of the latest technology, breaking the boundaries, knowing how to use it, and then how to connect it into our operations. So we had huge integration problems in those days because you have several different things at play to make an ISP work, at least in those days. And so we were very good at finding how to integrate that. And so when we combined this technology, we were able to create a much more superior service. And we were able to do it at a fraction of the cost. And we were able to use the money that we were going to go public with to expand like hell without anybody really understanding how we did it. So that's probably one of the, notable growth hacks. Yeah. So there was
That-
a second
that's
question,
awesome.
right?
Yeah. Thank you, Nader.
Which is?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah.
Second question, how to participate in the growth hack in June?
Okay,
Yeah,
so that's the growth
that's
hacking
by
challenge.
nomination. That's by nomination, right, Nader?
Yeah, that's right. So if you want to approach me, Samir, or one of the contenders, you can introduce yourself and just say, I have an interest in becoming part of this. And so what happens is somebody has to nominate you, right? So you need to get to know somebody who's inside the system, and they'll give you an idea of what's happening. And then if you fit and there's it can work, they'll nominate you. That's how it works.
And also, let me put some emphasis there because we're actually looking at entrepreneurs who have had considerable success with their business, both pre-COVID, during COVID, and now. So we are evaluating different scenarios, and based on which the nominations are being kind of given. Essentially, you could be a startup as well, but we really want to see your mindset, your growth mindset, as and see how you have implemented that in your business.
Yeah, because one of the criteria, sorry to interrupt, but one of the criteria is you must be operating for 6 months minimum. Like, so the reason being, just to explain it to everybody, like, you need to be actually taking action and operating, right? So it doesn't matter if it's working well or not working well. That's not what we're looking at. What we're looking at is that you're actually operating and actually running the business. If it's just an idea or you're trying to bring an idea to life, this will not help you. I mean, it can help, but it becomes very difficult for us to implement that for you.
And one more point I want to add, because Nader, you kind of handed over the torch to me to nominate. I think I put some criterias of my own inside so that we can find really awesome entrepreneurs. And couple of criterias is whether you had success or failure doesn't matter, but have you tried 2 to 3 growth hacks in your company? And second, as you said, it should be an operating company. And I would personally also like to look at whether you've made some revenues out of that growth hack or have failed miserably, but that learning has to be clearly identified. And also I think based on what nominations we are looking at, we're looking at really some seasoned entrepreneurs, who have some good traction and really want to cross the chasm, meaning let's say they've raised $5-10 million and now they want to go to the $100 million mark. Those kind of entrepreneurs we're trying to identify. Maybe it's a startup as well, but if you have that mindset, again, no competition to that, but really we are looking for very smart individuals who can come in, can take that challenge, the 10-day. By the way, it's full. Another, you should also put something in perspective that it's full 10 days. It's a lot of work.
Yeah, and that's one of the first questions people ask me. I say, like, listen, I mean, the process itself is like, just imagine you're putting 30 minutes to an hour per day for the 10 days for the process itself. And probably you put less than that, but it's the amount of effort that you're going to put to execute on the actual growth hacks within that space of time, which is really the variable amount of time. So for me, I mean, to me, I mean, the candidates the contenders that I found who do very well at this don't even think about that. Actually, they don't even care how much time goes into it because they're so invested in the process and so invested in their growth. They don't care if it takes an hour or 100 hours. It's irrelevant to them. Actually, what they're looking at is the result, and they're looking very carefully at the process and how to get that result. And that's what this is about. So, if you're worried about like, oh, I'm going to put in time and I don't know if it's going to work, then this is not for you. But if you've got the mindset where like, okay, I'm going to do what it takes to get this done. I'm going to implement this process and I'm going to grow. This is for you. It's a very interesting learning and watching these kind of behaviors. And I'll probably be doing some videos about that, kind of some of the things I see in the growth mindset. By the way, so in my book as well, when you get it, we talk about in here about the 14 habits of a growth hacker. And we talk about how the mindset of a growth hacker works. So we talk about things like curiosity. So if you've got like this mindset where like at the center of everything you do, there's this high level of curiosity, which you ask things like, like, why is this happening? Or why is this not happening? Or why is it happening this way? Or why someone hasn't solved it yet? Or why hasn't it not been solved very well? So if you're having a lot of those kind of curiosity questions in your mind and you're looking at how to solve some of those things, you probably already have some growth hacker DNA in you. So when you read the book, you're going to be like identifying like, oh, wow, okay, I'm flexible, I'm open, I'm diplomatic. So diplomacy plays a really large role. And it's one of these underestimated things. So we have some growth hackers that are just technically brilliant, but they're really shitty at diplomacy and they kill relationships and they find themselves isolated. So just read the book. It talks about these things and what happens. You probably witnessed or felt this or going through this right now as we speak.
And just to add on top of that, at Founder Institute, we have something called epic sprints. These are like the startup weekend, sprints, which are very timed. You're given a week to kind of turn things upside down. And I also see some founders who dropped off from the program because it's quite a demanding program. And literally, this is how the 10-day growth hacking challenge would be. Really, it'll turn upside down your thinking and everything else. So really, if you want to nominate yourselves, you can contact me. By the way, just a small, you can just directly drop us an email with why you would like to participate. UAE. And Manal, may I request you to type that email in the chat box if you can.
Sure.
UAE at fimail.co. UAE at fimail.co. If you can drop an expression of interest, why we should nominate you for the growth challenge, 10-day growth challenge, then would love to consider that as a nomination and would consider announcing that on 15th of June.
Also,
Lovely.
Samir, I'm going to type into the chat my YouTube channel where people can go and they can see the challenge in action. And you're going to find like just a ton of content, like literally daily doing small videos that just come out. They'll give you like tidbits. Like one of the most popular ones is like, it's called Growth Like Cocaine. And I'm not going to tell you about it. You got to go Google it or YouTube it and watch it. And it talks about a phenomenon in growth that is like probably the number one reason why people fail in growth. So go just check it out. It's Growth Like Cocaine. And don't worry about the title, just watch it and see it. So you're gonna find like a ton of this stuff on there that just shows you live how this happens and how some of the challengers have actually overcome this, how they deal with it. So you'll go through the same process if you get nominated. And yeah, it's fun, by the way. I know Samir's like laying down the law on you because yeah, you need to be disciplined. He's right. But the thing is, we make this process a lot of fun. And if you're seriously dedicated to growth, you're going to just love it. You're going to enjoy it. It's going to be fun rather than hard work. So
Deadly fun.
Yeah.
Let's go to the next question, Manal.
Sure. Yeah. So we have a question about some startup digital automation space focusing on consultancy, and currently they're trying to do automated LinkedIn outreach. So they are asking for advice or suggestions on how to grow their beta user base besides this strategy of automated LinkedIn outreach. Any other suggestions?
Okay. So do you remember I was talking about evolution and black hat versus white hat? So the minute a white hat growth hack, and this is why you're asking me the question, and you're suffering from white hat techniques. So LinkedIn has been locking down and blocking APIs. They've been blocking scrapers. They've been pretty well blocking or minimizing a lot of the automation tools. Hence why you're asking the question. Now, they're not the only ones, right? Every major platform has this exact same problem. Now you'll know exactly why some of the top growth hacks are secrets, right? They're in the dark gray area because the minute they become known, the exploitation becomes so big that everybody's doing it and all of a sudden it gets shut down and it doesn't work anymore, okay? So outreach, so outreach is a part of a larger element in my world. So I run something called the Growth Ninja School, and inside the training, we look at customer acquisition. So what you're really talking about is customer acquisition and then outreach on how to do that. Now, there are many ways to do that. We can spend hours talking about that. But the problem with it is that things are changing daily, literally. We had one automation tool that we were using that connected with YouTube. It's been like that for a long time. And then YouTube just shut down the API, right? So everybody who's been using this, their whole scalability plan has just changed or got demolished. LinkedIn is one of them as well. So LinkedIn tries to push you to their automation tool, which is the Navigator. And my only suggestion, without giving away any super secrets here, is use their internal native automation and then find automation tools that work with their native automation tool. Use it as a channel to funnel into the platform. And any platform that you find where there's a native integration that allows others to integrate into, and those integrations, as I'm telling you, will not be very visible. They won't be out there. You'll find ways, I can tell you that, but they won't just be out there in your face. Because if I typed in LinkedIn automation outreach, I'll get a ton of companies right now. If I go find ways to tap in integrations into their Sales Navigator and their other native automation tools, you'll still find things, but it won't be as many. And that's because that channel is where you want to be at. So, I mean, yeah, I hope that helps.
Brilliant.
Awesome. Thank you.
Do you have any more questions, Manal?
No questions in the question answers. Let's see if we have anyone who raised his hand. Nothing. No, Samir.
Excellent. So having said that, I would like to thank Nader for sharing and helping all of you crack the code to growth hacking. You know, maybe you got some knowledge. There's more coming. We keep doing a lot of these events just to kind of educate the community and literally, if you want to join a Founder Institute program, which with fantastic mentors and advisors like Nader, feel free to come into our GCC Silicon Valley program, which begins on 6th of July. Applications and admissions are open. If you go to fi.co/apply/GCC, we have many founders, right from top tech to hardware, very interesting ideas brewing up, and we'll kind of guide you from idea to a company. In 14 weeks, you'll walk away with an incorporated company, and potentially will also guide you to the right investors and things like that. So happy to answer any questions. If you also go to fi.co/FAQ, which is our frequently asked questions on why you should join the program, feel free to look up all the content. It's quite comprehensive. And if you still need to contact us, we are available an email away, uae@fimail.co. So with that, we would love to take your leave, and we'll be joining soon with another program next week, which is our cohort 2 graduation. So once you get into your FI portal account, you will also see all the events which keep coming up. And we have many events, including co-founder recruiting and stuff like that. So for your startup, if you're looking for smart co-founders, and right now it's just become, the world has become a recruiting ground for talent. So definitely keep coming back and kind of keep looking for things that interest you the most, and we'll keep building the community. So having said that, thank you very much, Nader, for your time today, and look forward to engaging with you again. Manal, thanks for moderating the session. Q&A. And thank you, everyone. You have a good evening. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Simran. I put two resources in the chat as well, which is the My Growth thing and my site. You guys can just go ahead and get a lot of free content there as well.
Brilliant.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Nader, Samir.
Thank you.
And have a good night, everyone.